Whether you're brand new or you're looking to scale, if you're into commercial real estate, this is the you. I kind of wanted to get into my commercial real estate journey, and I'm going to tell that story through the first property that I bought because I think it's pretty illustrative of kind of everything that I'm trying to teach and everything that I'm trying to get people to understand and get excited about commercial real estate. I originally got into real estate to begin with. I was working in the hospital as an ICU physician assistant for over a decade. I got attracted to real estate like everybody else, for that passive income. And then, quickly found out, bought a couple of single family rentals. It wasn't passive by any means. And it also wasn't a lot of money. I was making a couple $100 a month and then things would go wrong and that was zero. Thankfully, my life changed when I was sending out postcards to folks with single family houses to buy their house at a discount. I didn't know it at the time, but I was starting a wholesale business. And one of the very first callers that called back said, "Hey, I don't have a house for sale. I have a warehouse that I'd like to sell. Do you guys buy warehouses?" And I was like, "Sure." And didn't know anything about it. Had never even thought about getting into commercial real estate. But I sure as heck wasn't going to say no to one of my first real leads. And so he was like, "Hey, you can meet me down here this afternoon if you want to check it out." I was like, "Okay." And it was about 30 minutes away from my house. And so I frantically kind of looked at different commercial real estate audible books, picked one, downloaded it, and kind of frantically listened to it as fast as I could on Audible on the way down, like 2x speed or something. Didn't really pick anything up. Walked through the property, did a lot of concerned face, looking at everything. Yes, ooh, kind of making all the appropriate noises when he said things. And he said he wanted $500,000 for it. And it was, I believe, 15,000 square foot industrial warehouse. So I was like, okay. And we got under contract. But then I left there going, well, you know what? Now I got to find someone that knows what the heck they're talking about. And that started me down the journey of reaching out to local folks who knew something about commercial real estate. I ended up finding somebody who would, over the next several months, become a friend. We ended up not buying that warehouse, but I made this friendship. And this person, a couple months later, was like, "Hey, I have this really good office deal. I need some help finding the funding for it." And me working in the hospital had plenty of connections with capital partners. And so I looked at the deal. I liked the deal. And so he brought the property. I brought the money. And that's how a partnership was formed. So let's tell you a little bit about the property. So this is a bank-owned property. It was 2 different office buildings, 20,000 square foot each, on a 2-acre parcel, both in separate property taxes. They had been vacant for 2 years. One of them was a complete shell. It had fire damage. It had a roof leak where some water was getting in. There was still a tree sitting on the roof. The inside was down to the studs. It had no working plumbing, electrical, HVAC, anything. We considered that building essentially a free building, but the price was so good. We were focused on the other building, which was also 20,000 square foot, that we thought was completely ready to go to rent to tenants. Now, it needed some cosmetic refreshing, which we had budgeted about $100,000 for. So we thought, hey, we can buy this building. By the way, the purchase price we agreed to with them was $850,000. If you're at home doing math, that is $20 per square foot. Like, that is an insane number. We bought this in the summer of 2021. So, COVID was a big factor. This is still in the middle of COVID. Everybody's worked from home. Everyone's scared office is going to die permanently and no one's ever going to darken the door of an office again. So that played a big, big role in us getting that number. But it was bank owned. The bank just wanted it off the balance sheet. So how did we fund that deal? So I'm not sure I would do this every time, but we were new. We got a hard money lender who funded $650,000 of the $850 purchase. He also gave us an additional $100,000 in a construction loan that we'd have to do draws for. So that was $750,000. We then essentially started what we still use to this day. We call the LLC partnership method, where we brought 2 limited partners. These were capital partners I had a previous relationship from the hospital from. They each invested $150,000. And for that, they got a percent ownership in the LLC that bought the building. And so we had $300,000 from them at purchase, $650,000 from the hard money lender. So if you're doing math at home, that's $750,000. So we bought it for 850. We got cut a check at close, and initially we didn't have any of our own money into this deal. So like I was talking about last episode, you do not need to have a bunch of your own money to get into commercial real estate. So we bought it. What happened from there? So we started the initial rehab. We were doing a bunch of cosmetic work. Most of that we were hiring out ourselves and kind of playing general contractor ourselves. We were even picking up materials. We were trying to get it done as cheap as possible. And the whole goal was to get this thing ready to reapply for certificate of occupancy, which is called CO. It's a commercial real estate word. They need to be able to come into your building and say, yes, you can have customers in here. You can run a business out of here. You can apply for your business license. So that's what a CO is for. Part of getting a CO is the fire marshal has to sign off. Something we did not think about because my partner had owned other office buildings, and most office buildings don't need sprinkler systems, fire suppression systems. However, in this particular building, it had not had CO, so we weren't grandfathered in. And unfortunately, this city had had several fires over the past several years, and they had changed their fire suppression laws. Now, if we had just taken 5 minutes in our due diligence period to call that fire marshal, we would have known that before we bought the building. But we were new and we didn't. And so we had already bought the building, and we had another 160,000 line item that was the fire suppression system. That's a sprinkler system, fire alarm, fire main to bring water to the building, and a riser. So all of that's really, really expensive. We are actually super lucky it wasn't 250 grand plus. And that was a little bit of a stressful time. We ended up covering that money ourselves amongst the 4 partners and just getting it done. But really, really stressful time. Absolutely call the fire marshal on every single building you buy and don't get in trouble that way. Even if you think you're fine, take the 5 minutes, call them. So it took us a little bit longer. It took us about 8 months to get our certificate of occupancy because of that fire suppression system. We had only thought it was going to take us 2 to 3 months, but that takes a lot longer to do. So from there, we started leasing up the building. Thankfully, we had so much lead time and the building was in pretty good shape. We were able to pre-lease it up or kind of get leases signed that were starting when we got our certificate of occupancy. So we were probably 40, 50% leased up before we even opened. So that was great. Then we pretty quickly got to 70, 80%. And this is rent by the room, small office. We had 35 tenants in this 20,000 square foot building. So we got it leased up. And then our next step was, how do we get everyone's capital back? We wanted to keep the building. We wanted them to cash flow. So we called around to a bunch of local banks, ultimately found a bank that liked this kind of product and wanted to do a cash out refinance with us. Gave them all the docs, went through that whole process, and we ultimately were able to get a loan for, I believe at the time, $1.6 million. So we pulled out everyone's original capital. So the capital investors got their money back. We got our kind of fire suppression sprinkler capital call money back. We paid off the hard money loan, and everybody got some cash, tax-free proceeds from that refinance. And we had a nice little war chest budget for if things went wrong going forward. So if you do the math at home, we probably spent $150K on that cosmetic rehab that we thought was $100. We were new. We were not great at estimating scope of work. Add another $160K for that fire suppression system. We were all in on this purchase for about $1.2 million. From there, we just owned and operated the building. But this building consistently battled churn. And what I mean by that is, we're signing up these rent by the room are all small businesses, entrepreneurs, folks with a dream like we had of running a business. And a lot of them fail and a lot of them aren't good financially. And that's just part of being a new business. So it didn't make as much cash flow as we had projected, but we kind of owned, operated, kept it going from there. We still haven't done anything with the shell sitting over here. So a couple years later, we decided, why don't we list that thing for lease, see if we can get a tenant that wants to take up the whole building, and then we'll do construction on it. Because we had gotten some quotes and construction cost was going to be $1 million plus to do almost anything in that building. As we had it advertised for lease, someone came around and said, hey, would you be open to an offer to sell the building? We originally were like, no, we don't really want to sell it. We want to fix it up. We want to own these 2 buildings for a long time. But they said, what about $1.75 million? So we said, okay, because that was for the shell. If you look at it, originally we bought 2 buildings for $850. That means technically we bought that building for $425,000 or less. So we made a profit just off selling that building for $1.2 million. We sold that building last year. The beautiful thing is because we had this small partnership, we then took that money, 1031 exchanged it, and went out and bought an industrial warehouse for $1.6 million. That was making cash flow every month. The beautiful thing is if we had sold that building and just taken the cash and paid taxes on it, we would have paid $400,000, $500,000 in taxes on just that first sale. Fast forward to today, on the existing building that we still own, we are under contract with the tenant to buy that building for $3.5 million. When everything is all said and done, we still have a note on that building for $1.5 million, so we'll clear kind of $2 million in cash off that sale. That tax bill would be like $700,000 according to my accountant. So we are going to 1031 that building as well, which is a beautiful thing about a small partnership team that's all in alignment. And we're going to keep this LLC rolling. We are going to take that $2 million, put it into at least one more building, if not several more buildings. We can get a note on that. We're going to buy and hold at least $10 million of real estate from that initial $1.2 million purchase. So those 2 buildings absolutely and completely have changed my life and my partner's life. And so I know it's super cheesy to be like, one deal will change your life. But in this circumstance, it did. And I'm not saying every deal you do is going to be like this and you're going to make $3.75 million. But if you do some deals, you're going to get deals like this. And I've made other deals that made me a ton of money, not exactly this amount, but did really well. And so it's going to happen to you. So I just wanted to go through some key take-home points of this particular deal and some things that I want you to take away. First of all, anyone can do this. If I could do it at this stage of my life back in 21, you can absolutely do it. Back then, I was working on COVID patients in the hospital. I was running and ramping up a full-time wholesale business. I was working full-time in the hospital, and I was over there writing pitch decks to pitch it to folks that I knew to raise capital on night shift. I had barely done a couple residential deals at the time that we were going under contract on this deal. So one of the things that I've always been good at that I would highly recommend if you're going to get into something like this is you have to be comfortable with failing. You have to be comfortable with the fear of the unknown because you're going to fail. But you got to take action anyways. And that's what we did in this deal. And I hope you can tell we made a ton of mistakes. That fire marshal thing, big mistake. And again, we were still going to have to pay that, but we could have been prepared from a capital standpoint to pay that. GCing the deal ourselves was slower. And while the contractors were cheaper, it took a lot longer. And the quality of work may not have been where it needed to be. We didn't do a good job on the scope of work or inspection diligence during that period. And then owning and operating that building, we made a ton of mistakes in the process of getting tenants and keeping tenants. This sounds like a lot of time, I assume. But the beautiful thing is you have the time to do this. It's actually probably not as much time as I'm making it out to be. I view commercial real estate as like a sprint, walk kind of scenario. When you're up front looking for the property, you don't have to sprint. When you find that good deal, you should sprint to get it under contract. But then typically the contract period is fairly long, so you got time to do what you need to do. And then raising capital can definitely feel like a sprint, especially if you're new at it. Once you buy it, doing the renovation, getting it up and operating can feel like a sprint. And then stabilizing it at times. But all that, these timelines are longer in commercial, which is what I like about it. So you don't have to rush all the time. You do have to rush sometimes. But I literally did this with 2 other full-time jobs, a couple hours a week. You can absolutely do it on not a lot of time. And like I said, one deal can really change your life. The 4 partners that own this building will own well over $10 million of real estate from this one $1.2 million deal going forward. So just do one of these a year. Imagine if you did one deal like that every single year. Imagine if you did a deal that was a quarter as good as that one once a year. Like, how much will that change your life? You can very, very easily do one of these a year. You don't have to change what you're doing day to day. If you got a great W 2 income, you're really good at your job, keep it. If you're a fix and flipper, wholesaler, buy and hold investor full time, and you're really good at managing flips or whatever you're doing, and you're making active income off of that, keep doing that. But just grab one of these once a year. It's going to change your net worth fundamentally. It's going to change your reliable cash flow. It's not passive, but it can end up being reliable eventually. It's going to generate you big pops of active income when you sell these things or refinance these things. And the tax benefit alone is massive. I just talked about almost $1.2 million in tax savings when we sold those two buildings. And that doesn't even get into the depreciation part of it. So you don't need to stop what you're doing, what you're already good at. Keep doing that. Just go out and get one of these a year. So that's it for today. Keep listening, reach out, follow us on socials, check out our website, CRE-Playbook.com, and we'd love to hear from you.